In the stillness of Pinebrook Estates, life was measured in compliance. Rules woven tightly into every corner, controlling how grass should be mowed, what flags might flutter, and what faces could show in night-lit windows. For years, the flow of suburban existence had been a gentle current, one carefully overseen by the HOA with its laminated rulebooks and zero-tolerance stance. But beneath that placid routine, a quieter world thrived, one not written about in the newsletter nor captured by compliance patrols. It began with a handful of dazzling figures, darting between buried ceramic castles and waving green stalks. Aquariums were a secret language in Pinebrook. Calm bubbles, gentle light, and unique beauty. For Paul and Jenna Christensen, their living room fish tank was more than decor. It was a shelter, an evening ritual for their children, and a continual source of serenity in the tumult of the outside world. The tank's shimmering blues and flickers of gold gave their little corner abode a charm that could not be measured by any official scale. Their neighbors harbored similar sanctuaries. The Smiths were proud hosts of a gentle school of tetras. Across the street, Mrs. Lopez had spent decades cultivating rare bettas and tracking the beautiful swells of their fins. In secret, Pinebrook was a haven of aquarists, bonded by a passion as discreet as it was meaningful. But in the spring of the year the droughts began, and the HOA turned its eyes. Launched by Karen Lamont, the new president of domestic affairs, the board quoted concerns of water risk and property damage due to tank leakage. With rising alarm over speculative insurance prices, Karen launched a campaign opposing indoor aquariums. Her rationale was simple and stunning. If a fish tank leaks, who will pay, and what precedent will it set? The edict came abruptly. In one short email, the board ruled all fish tanks, no matter the size, no matter the diligence, banned effective immediately. Fines began to dribble in, $50 for the first discovered tank, rising weekly for continuous resistance. Compliance officers were deployed, peeking through windows for the telltale glow and hearing for the faint hum of hidden pumps. The impression was chilling. Text threads erupted with dread and indignation. Neighbors traded accounts of fines paid and tanks moved to basements, memories packed away with their shells and delicate plastic ferns. For the Christensens, loss settled heavily. They unplugged the tank, removed the castle, and packaged the community they had meticulously crafted. Their children placed fingertips to cold glass, searching for flickers of movement now gone. Across Pinebrook, the aquarists retreated, defeated not only by rule but by the disgrace of rebellion. Karen's proclamations were met with grumbles, but few dared openly protest. Yet resistance sometimes finds its flame in the tiniest glimmer. At a chance afternoon gathering, Mrs. Lopez whispered to Paul, "They can ban our tanks, but they can't hide what we love." Word spread, embers caught, and in quiet rooms, the aquarists began to dream not of acquiescence but of rebellion. It started with a single window, left uncovered. The next evening, Paul slipped his aquarium back into full sight, lights blazing, fish undeterred. Within hours, the Smiths followed suit, bringing their tank forward and drawing back the shades. The neighbors watched, some with anxiety, some with amazement. By the end of the week, Pinebrook's main thoroughfare gleamed with living exhibitions. Neighbors coordinated. Mrs. Lopez hung posters identifying each tank species. Others posted facts about the care and beauty of their fish, and still others invited friends to come by and watch the nightly show. Children mapped out routes for visitors, and local animal clubs joined in, bringing pamphlets on responsible aquarium care and hosting workshops. The effect was immediate. Where Karen had anticipated silent submission, she found spectacle. Some neighbors rejoiced quietly, others posted images on social media, while city reporters drove in from beyond the gates. The HOA replied with threats and papers, but soon, their fines were overwhelmed by the tidal surge of support and publicity. Karen's power, previously unassailable, began to weaken. The radiance from Pinebrook seeped onto Twitter and then to the city council. Arguments on water safety clashed with talks on the benefits of pet companionship and neighborly spirit. The tanks had become battlegrounds not only for fish but also for autonomy and innovation. The Christensens, at the heart of the movement, sensed renewed purpose. Their living room, long a tranquil refuge, was now a landmark in an unforeseen war. Each night, they watched families assemble beneath their window, tracing fish with thrilled eyes and expressing whispered aspirations for the neighborhood's future. Pinebrook Estates was evolving. Ripples ripple beneath its calm surface, bearing the story not only of water but also of resistance, wonder, and the daring to oppose restrictions that stifled life. As the week drew to a conclusion, protest rallies were planned, petitions began circulating, and Karen Lamont recognized that the following board meeting might not go as smoothly as those before. This was just the beginning. Chapter 2 would see Pinebrook's aquarium rebellion gather a citywide crowd and force the HOA to answer for their vision of order at the sacrifice of beauty. The buzz surrounding Pinebrook's aquarium windows didn't fade. It increased. As neighbors grew bolder in their quiet protest, the street transformed each evening into an underwater parade. Dazzling blues, radiant greens, and aquariums pulsing with life behind every lighted pane. Children dragged their parents from house to house, tracing neon guppies and spreading angelfish with their little fingertips pushed against the glass. Local photographers set up tripods on corners, capturing creative photos that would eventually ripple far beyond the gates of Pinebrook Estates. Karen Lamont's well-oiled government tried to respond. The HOA's official app delivered push messages bristling with additional admonishments and threats of cumulative fines. Civic order demands immediate compliance. One alert barked. Inspectors raced through in pairs, clipboards at the ready, counting tanks and noting addresses. Karen herself made rounds in the HOA golf cart, her face set as she peered into windows for indications of fish and resistance. But the tide, as tides do, rolled higher. With every threat from the HOA, Pinebrook's inhabitants grew less secretive and more coordinated. A digital forum formed, an aquarium alliance, where strategies and encouragement blossomed. Residents pooled resources, donating money for legal counsel and sharing templates for appealing unjust fines. The Smiths, spurred by neighbors, live-streamed their tank cleaning and fish feeding, conversing with hundreds about aquatic husbandry and the injustice of Karen's prohibition. Media coverage accelerated. The local news was first to arrive, with a story titled, "HOA finds family for pet fish. Neighborhood fights back." Within days, regional publications picked up the topic, presenting the aquarium clash as a question of authoritarian control versus personal joy. Environmentalists weighed in, some complimenting proper aquarium care, others expressing worry about water use. But the protest tanks were scrupulously handled. Animal welfare groups welcomed the approach as kind and innovative, an antidote to suburban melancholy. Social media became viral. A hashtag aquarium freedom, rose in popularity, gaining support from aquarists and pet lovers worldwide. Pet companies and aquarium groups gave livestock, materials, and even small tanks to encourage families, establishing a sense of solidarity and common purpose. As city council arguments flared, lines were established not simply between homeowners and the HOA but between those embracing Karen's strict rule and those championing individual expression, pets, and communal resiliency. The narrative ballooned. A mayor visited, municipal lawyers questioned Karen's power, and Pinebrook itself became a case study for every HOA and city wrestling with concerns of autonomy. Inside Pinebrook, the movement grew into a spectacle. Weekends brought window walks, informal tours when residents welcomed visitors with food and explainers about their tanks, making maps of the aquatic trail. Crowds spilled beyond the neighborhood's limits. The Christensens and Mrs. Lopez found themselves hosting local teachers, marine biologists, and even city council members anxious to see the protest in action. Karen Lamont answered with escalation. The HOA raised the fines, recruited legal counsel, and tried to use emergency powers by alleging water damage risk. But opposition built new alliances. Home insurance brokers confirmed that most tanks fell below coverage requirements. Plumbers agreed to inspect and certify aquariums for safety. Confronted with expert testimony and public support, the HOA's argument exposed weaknesses. On the night of the greatest window walk, Pinebrook shone with aquariums in every hue. News vans crowded the street, drones hovered overhead, and the walkways thrummed with the energy of nonviolent protest. Strangers mixed with residents, sharing stories and planning for future aquarium-themed events in city parks and schools. Defiance transformed into opportunity. Petitions to reverse the prohibition collected hundreds of signatures and landed on the desk of the city's legal department. Protests extended outward, spurring similar activities in nearby HOAs and sparking broader disputes about citizens' rights to personal expression. Karen, besieged by rising public pressure and exposed to negative media, asked for an emergency board meeting to restore order. Inside the Christensen's home, the family gathered amid a rainbow of tank lights and laughing, reminding everyone that courage sometimes simply means refusing to hide what you love. Their window, deemed an infringement by Karen, had become a symbol across the city, a monument to the beauty of modest deeds magnified by community. As the chapter finished, Pinebrook stood at the brink of a decision. The next board meeting would be packed, with city leaders in attendance, petitions on the table, and the world watching. Karen's vision for the community was shattering, and the waves from Pinebrook's rebellion were destined to crest over all she had sought to manage. The momentum was unstoppable now. Chapter 3 would bring the confrontation out of living rooms and across a crowded city council hall, the aquarium showdown's defining moment. By the time Pinebrook Estates met for a special HOA board and city council meeting, the quiet rebellion had blossomed into a movement impossible to ignore. The night before the showdown, traffic packed the once sleepy roads. Homeowners arrived on foot and by automobile, bearing their children, their petitions, and, most importantly, their stories. Local journalists and national correspondents jockeyed for position outside the community center, the air pulsating with anticipation and stakes higher than ever. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, a churning mix of optimism, apprehension, and righteous indignation. Karen Lamont positioned herself at the head of the room, surrounded by the board, clutching a folder filled with documentation. She wore a facade of calm, but beneath it, her grasp over Pinebrook's fate had grown fragile. Each seat was occupied. Standing room overflowed. Tank owners, commanded by the Christensens, exchanged patient smiles but prepped for conflict. Proceedings began with Karen's prepared statement. She highlighted public safety, risk management, and even neighborhood uniformity, giving data, images, and HOA letters demonstrating purported risks from home aquariums. Yet, for every anecdote, proof and professional opposition waited in the wings. Insurance salespeople stood up to clarify coverage, plumbers provided qualifications, and veterinarians and educators advocated for the intrinsic worth of aquaria in caring, teaching, and therapeutic living. The council moderator opened the floor to resident testimony. The Aquarium Alliance had prepared well. First came the quiet voices, children describing their favorite fish, teachers recounting the classroom impact of watching aquatic life. Retirees spoke of lonely evenings enlivened by the peaceful company of fish, and parents detailed relationships their families experienced in caring for tanks. These anecdotes formed a vivid counter-narrative. Aquariums were not a liability but a source of healing, learning, and neighborhood spirit. Next followed the parade of facts. Insurance reps, legal experts, and city personnel affirmed that with proper certification and inspection, the danger of damage was extremely low, less than dishwashers, water heaters, or washing machines approved without issue. Photos and information from external aquarists showed thriving aquariums in the city and around the globe, contradicting Karen's assertion that Pinebrook must restrict them for modern excellence. The room shifted, the crowd invigorated, minds expanded. Social media feeds burst as excerpts and live streaming aired the action to thousands. #Aquarium Freedom trended, receiving promises of support from people as far as distant states. As the council discussed, the board was no longer a force to enforce but a body under scrutiny, their authority questioned for the first time in years. Karen was agitated, warning that reversing the prohibition may set a precedent for endless non-compliance. Yet her board seemed divided, and her position was undermined by the overwhelming testimony and facts against her assertions. A local council member read aloud the growing petition, the signatures of hundreds echoing the chorus of hope in the chamber. The council warned they would act if the HOA failed to adapt. After hours of argument, the moderator called for a show of hands. City officials, witnessing the strength of democratic protest, recommended not only reversing Pinebrook's aquarium ban but also establishing clear guidelines for responsible pet ownership, suggesting permits, safety standards, and voluntary inspections instead of blanket prohibition and punitive fines. The vote came. The aquarium prohibition would be repealed by city order, and a committee formed to draft compassionate, balanced guidelines that reflected actual community values. Petitions had forced change, protest had garnered attention, but empathy and communal effort had triumphed. The hall exploded with applause, cheers, and some tears. Families hugged, teachers shouted, and homeowners leaned across aisles to shake hands with former strangers. The press touted a watershed victory, a glowing narrative that would provide a pattern for HOA reform far and wide. The aquariums at Pinebrook, gleaming through the joyous night, signified not only a success over overreach but also the promise of belonging. Karen Lamont, astonished and chastened, departed the meeting alone. The board, fragmented and confused, was compelled to reevaluate its direction. The Christensens strolled home beneath a velvet sky, hearts alight and joined by neighbors whose lives and windows would henceforth shine a little brighter. As the tide of reform began to sweep beyond Pinebrook, city officials formalized the new standards, establishing a framework for sustainable transformation. The revolt was done, but the process of rebuilding trust and sustaining progress was only beginning. Chapter 4 would show the citywide impact of Pinebrook's defiance. New traditions blossoming, new ways of connecting through windows and water, and the jubilant aftermath that demonstrated every small ripple can change the river. With the ban overturned and the Aquarium Alliance triumphant, Pinebrook Estates began a new era. The illumination from the tanks that had once marked rebellion now projected a soothing togetherness across the neighborhood, inviting both old friends and new strangers to its altered streets. Where windows had previously shielded secrets and battled regulations, they now invited eyes from the world. A living gallery of aquatic color, movement, and meaning that crossed boundaries of age, background, and belief. The city's choice resonated way beyond Pinebrook's postal codes. Other areas responded with greetings and asked for help, anxious to nurture similar campaigns against repressive or outmoded HOA regulations. Pet organizations, local businesses, and school groups joined the collaboration, hosting instructional aquarium activities at libraries, parks, and recreation centers. The initial protest organizers found themselves at the center of a citywide campaign to rethink what community looked like. Not a story of restrictions, but a tapestry of differences celebrated and displayed. The Christensens' living room became a hub for volunteers, artists, and new activists. Their tank, a symbol of resistance and now optimism, housed not just beloved pets but also donated fish for families who wanted to join the aquarium path. Mrs. Lopez led hands, teaching the finer elements of tank maintenance to children and retirees alike. The Smiths organized monthly tank talks, when experts and hobbyists answered questions and swapped anecdotes beneath string lights and laughing. The annual Pinebrook Aquarium Festival was founded. For 1 week every spring, tanks were placed up in every public building, apartment foyer, and city plaza, each one recorded, inspected, and ornamented with cards explaining their stories. Groups arranged aquatic art classes, underwater photography competitions, and scavenger hunts for endangered animals. Seniors conducted craft workshops, children led tours in homemade costumes, and the municipal council sponsored fish and story nights, listening to accounts from citizens whose lives had been impacted by the insurrection. Schools added aquarium keeping to scientific curricula, creating crosstown shows where kids could discuss discoveries under the careful eye of instructors and community volunteers. City parks constructed public tanks, safe, sustainable, and managed by local clubs, introducing new generations to environmental responsibility, biology, and the soothing grace of watching fish glide through peaceful water. Pinebrook itself became gentler and more expressive. The Alliance altered its focus from protest to preservation and outreach. Muralists painted aquatic sceneries on utility boxes and walkways. Musicians composed watery soundtracks performed throughout the window walks, their harmonies merging with the bubbling of filters and the twinkling of tank lights behind glass. Even former skeptics found themselves joining, attracted by the infectious spirit of transformation. Karen Lamont retreated from her presidency and from public dispute. Though she visited the event once, embarrassed and apprehensive, her role slipped into the background. New board members arose, formed by the teachings of empathy, inclusivity, and the necessity for communication. The HOA's culture shifted. It was now a venue for listening, compromise, and support, not rigidity and fear. The city documented Pinebrook's journey, presenting it at regional conferences and exporting lessons on how opposition, when handled with creativity and love, might heal divisions and inspire permanent development. The Pinebrook model became shorthand for reform. Local councils embraced its standards, organizations acknowledged its history, and families from throughout the county traveled to watch how protest could build new traditions. And for Paul and Jenna Christensen, Mrs. Lopez, and scores of once silenced neighbors, life was richer. Their tanks glimmered not only with the grace of swimming fish but also with deeper connection. Each day brought new visitors, fresh stories, and shared optimism. The wounds of the previous fights disappeared, replaced with trust and appreciation for those prepared to risk comfort for transformation. As the season turned and the next festival approached, a new banner was draped through the center of Pinebrook's Main Street. Waters connect us all. The Alliance prepared again to celebrate, support, and teach, glowing with the certainty that every household, every life, had something beautiful to share. But the story wasn't yet complete. Chapter 5 would illustrate how Pinebrook's impact would continue, ripple outward, and influence the future of HOAs, communities, and regular families daring not merely to preserve joy but to make it public. As seasons changed and years began piling new memories atop Pinebrook's aquarium revolt, the events that had once riven the neighborhood transformed into a legend, one handed down, recalled in news pieces, memoirs, classroom lessons, and friendly discussions at weekend gatherings. What began as a frantic protest had turned fluid, developing into a legacy that touched families, changed local regulations, and inspired movements well beyond its initial reach. Aquariums remained not only tolerated but also promoted across the city. The annual Pinebrook Aquarium Festival expanded, bringing people from adjacent counties, pulling aquarium societies, educators, artists, and outsiders who came to witness the miracle of cooperation and creativity that had bloomed from a battle over pet fish. Windows became proud displays, developing with each new tank and each new generation of guardians. It was no longer strange to see children tracing their palms across the glass, discovering darting neon tetras, sinuous koi, and bright cichlids as part of ordinary city life. Beauty normal, cherished, and permanent. The Christensen's old living room, eternally marked by the blue glow of their original tank, became a historical stop on the festival excursions. Schools partnered with the Alliance so every classroom had an aquarium, and scientific teachings were blended with stories of citizen involvement and ecological care. The coalition backed city welfare projects, gifting tanks to shelters, clinics, and elderly homes, spreading the therapeutic benefits Pinebrook had once risked fines to preserve. People from distant cities traveled to study the Pinebrook model, hoping to promote comparable change. HOAs around the country referenced Pinebrook's legacy when rewriting their own pet policies, often calling the founders to assist in designing new, more compassionate community agreements. The term windows as aquariums, neighbors as allies became a quiet rallying cry for families facing their own battles with unfair rules. Old scars vanished. Most inhabitants could hardly remember a time when regulations were more essential than relationships. Muralists filled Pinebrook with aquatic art, the HOA now financing creative initiatives and granting annual grants for beauty, generosity, and communal action. The board, long an engine of compliance, became a platform for meaningful discourse, compromise, and the support of common aims. Karen Lamont remained a cautionary story but also eventually, quietly, a participant. In the years after her resignation, she began to see how fear and control had blinded her to the gifts of community connection. She adopted her own little tank, learning from the Alliance, and sometimes volunteered at instructional workshops. Redemption comes gently, quietly. a reminder that even the hardest opponent may shift in the current of real empathy. For all its outward metamorphosis, Pinebrook's tale lived on most meaningfully in homes and hearts. For Paul and Jenna, for Mrs. Lopez, for the Smiths, and for the generations of children who followed, the window aquariums were silent symbols. That beauty and hope are worth defending, that the right to nurture life builds community stronger than any regulation, and that acts of courage, once hidden, can become the very current that sustains whole neighborhoods for decades. On the festival's 10th anniversary, the city planted a mosaic in Pinebrook Park, a sprawling walkway arranged like a river, inset with names of every family that participated in the rebellion, and etched with a single line, "Let light pour through." As dusk fell on this milestone, every tank in Pinebrook flickered on, their glows visible from street to street, signals to all who walked by that ordinary joys, when united, can illuminate a world. Collective memory shimmered in every blue flash and darting tail, proof that Pinebrook was never just about fish, never merely a battle over water or fines. It was a narrative of resilience and ingenuity, a reminder that even the smallest community, given guts, might change everything. And so, as a new generation placed their hands to luminous glass, Pinebrook Estates rested comfortably among the rippling lights, a place still defined by optimism, generosity, and the assurance that no rule could ever dim the heritage they'd built together.